everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cooling Solution, where we look to empower you with awareness and actionable insights. For those of you joining the live stream, thank you for being a part of it. As always, we're going to open up for your questions and comments. Please insert your questions in the comment sections of Facebook or in the chat section on YouTube, and we will do our best to get to them. Tonight's topic is learning at the speed of change. And, you know, most of us struggle with focus on personal development and growth during normal times. We'll add to that in pandemic, unprecedented uncertainty, and the social unrest and what we're dealing with in terms of systemic racism, and it can become nearly impossible. Well, we know that change is constant, but the question is, how do you learn with so much change in the environment? And that's what we're going to explore tonight. I'm joined with someone I know, like, and trust, and that's always a treat to have someone like that with me, Bejoy Philip. Bejoy is a talent and organizational development executive with progressive experience working with leading companies in both the financial and pharmaceutical industries. He believes the power of innovative culture, agile strategy, and modern leadership can change the game for teams and organizations. Bejoy, welcome to the Cooling Solution, man.
I really appreciate that, James. Yeah, absolutely. You said that much better than I could.
Well, you know, I try, brother. I try to make people feel welcome, man. I try.
I love that. I love that.
Good to have you, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, like everybody else, it's been hectic, crazy, emotional, challenging, all those things mixed in over the past couple months. Add to that my family just got a puppy this weekend, so I'm dealing with that as well. So
whose decision was that?
Listen, I tried my best to keep it as a no,
right? And
I got arm wrestled by both of my daughters, and I gave
in.
But I have to say, I probably wanted the dog more, and just came to grips with that.
Now it's on public record.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, you know, one of the things I like to ask folks, so people get to know who we're talking to, is what is one thing you can share about Bejoy that most people don't know?
That's a good one. You can find my career on LinkedIn, I'm sure. One thing that you may not know, people always ask me what's my background. I'm very proud of my culture and heritage, so I'm South Indian. And also that I've been in hip hop for the longest time in my life. So as a performing artist for over, I would say, 10 to 15 years practicing as an artist. And now I would say I'm a retired artist, but still keeping the hip hop alive still. Yeah, man. So guess what, man? So I wasn't sure if you were going to, you know, speak to that or not, because sometimes people get real humble. They hold back different things, but I queued something up, folks. Yes, I queued something up. So check this out, audience. So I've known Bejoy for like at least 15 years, right? Yeah,
at least
it's been
15
a long
years,
time.
okay? Yeah, but this is something new. And what I love is how he's integrating his leadership in HR. He leads HR strategy now at a financial institution, but I love how he's integrating the leadership aspect with his gifts and talents. So check this out, people.
Dude, let's get into this week's episode, Race Together.
Let's go. Bars at work. Race together, let's go. What's race when you raised by the same sun rays? Me and Jay, leadership styles P and J to K. Wanna block my shot? See me fade away, these smarts never fade. I'm hardened with a step back trade. Race, is it just genetic code or a social construct to put people in the mold? To stratify blacks from the whites, darks from the lights. I got the alt-right jokers fighting dark nights. The prejudice is found in the metrics. Meritocracy can't exist if I judge you in seconds. You can't change the past, but we can change the present. Race together, make the workplace safe for difference. Yeah, if we race together, we chase what's better. I forecast a good future if we face the weather. But we have to move forward, let our guards lower, let the love show up and face our inner holdups. Yeah, bars at work, advocates for leadership. Keep the dream alive that many died to give. Race together.
Yes. Love it, man.
I love the surprise.
I love it.
I love it.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's such a meaningful piece. So timely. I actually recorded that beginning of last year. And it was resting on my mind. Obviously, prejudice and discrimination, these topics are not new.
Right.
And just how relevant, though, that piece is right now with current events and context is really meaningful to me, and I'm sure many people. So
yeah. Absolutely. So to kick this topic off, man, learning at the speed of change, you know, to talk about learning, maybe we can start with a fundamental element, which is really I like to think self-management, right? And maybe we can just unpack that a little bit, in terms of self-management. And when I say self-management, particularly for you as a, again, head of HR strategy, what does that even mean to you? Self-management.
Self-management. It's interesting. You could probably take it to the career standpoint and say, how do you manage your career, your progress, your journey? There's some theoretical research tied to emotional intelligence where that term self-management is seen most of the time. So Daniel Goleman, for those that may not know, he was a founding father of emotional intelligence and a key researcher in all of that. And he coined this term of self-management. And in that, he really talks about leaders and people controlling impulses, emotional response, and self-regulating, those types of things. So self-management can mean internal to yourself. How are you managing the self intrinsically in how you respond and how you react to people and situations in your environment around you? And it could also mean in the context of learning at the speed of change, how do you manage yourself as a agent of change in the world of work? And what is your role to play, and how do you chart your course in career, in your profession, and the milestones you want to reach? So there's a little bit of grounded stuff that's out there on self-management, but you could take the term and apply it to many contexts.
There's some leeway for sure. Yeah. And, for me, I was thinking about it because, when I think about self-management, I think about what you said in addition to kind of setting your own, I like to use analogies, setting your own GPS, right? Really being clear about where you want to go and then plotting that course and managing your way along that course, right? Whether or not there's always going to be external influences, but you need to get a grip on and continue to push towards that direction. So you need to set the direction, and you need to control steering that direction all the way through.
Absolutely. I love the idea of just the markers and the GPS and all these things. You have a destination that you want to get to, and there's multiple paths to probably get there. And so having a monitoring your progress along the way and saying, am I where I want to be? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I learning what I'm supposed to be learning? And making pivots along the way are really important.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be the traffic signs.
Exactly.
There's going to be stops along the way and other things that were unplanned and unintended. So it's really important to chart that course. And I wouldn't say it's on a wall and it just stays static, but it's a evergreen iterative process that you go through.
So I know, I spent a little time in HR, but I've not done what you've done, man, being the head of HR strategy. I'm sure you get tons of questions such as, Mr. Philip, I'm in this part of the company right now, and I want to get up to here, right? And it's always up and to the right. No one really wants lateral moves, right? Everyone wants to go up and to the right. And that's cool. Nothing's wrong with that. And they desire to do so, and they're looking for the magic potion and the magic answer, right? How do you talk to them about the importance of learning and development relative to their career life cycle?
That's a really great question. It really comes back to, I ask them questions like, what is your motivation ultimately? What are you actually trying to get out of that question of how do I chart from here to here? If you're looking for just the promotion or just the next role, then my question would be, why? What is that doing for you? And what are your motivations? Are they extrinsic? Hey, I just want more money. I just want to get to this thing. Or is it more intrinsic? The meaningful work I want to do lends to this area, and I'm really trying to find my way there. I give them a lot of times my own story, being a computer engineer by academic standards, and now full-fledged HR, professional. How do you make that leap? It really came down to my motivations and saying I want to be intrinsically motivated by the work that I do and feel purpose and meaning in what I do. And not saying that technology wasn't a great learning ground for me, but I knew that there's other things that were, grabbing my attention and my passion. So those are the types of questions that I ask people. And it's to get to that place where are they open to the possibilities that your learning could be actually in a different group, a different department, a different function, maybe even, to your point, a lateral move. or moving from a manager to an actual subject matter expert.
Right.
And not managing people anymore. So these are the exploratory coaching questions you start to uncover where someone is and what's their appetite for learning and growth, or is it more just achieving the next hierarchical step?
Yeah, and you had a big question in there: the extrinsic or the intrinsic. How do people typically respond when you ask that question? Because again, a lot of times people are looking for a specific thing they're looking to get to, right? The next rung. How do people respond when you ask them that?
You know, it's interesting. They sometimes can be taken aback because no one outrightly says, I'm only doing it for the money, right? Or I'm only doing it for this. But it really gets down to what motivates you as a person. Are you achievement oriented? Are you engaged by just the learning process? So there's motivators that research has shown that, you know, we could have a blend of these motivators in us, but a lot of times we have some predominant motivators in us. And some people just have an appetite to learn so that the act of doing is fulfillment in itself. So it's not about the achievement of the next thing. It's actually, as long as I'm creating and doing and learning in the process, I'm completely fulfilled. So just getting to that self-revelation and not placing judgment on right, wrong, what's good or what's bad, but just knowing the self. This is all about self-management. What are you going after and why? When you answer those questions, you can make clearer decisions about your next steps.
Yeah. No, it's good. So now in this moment, if people come to you, you know, like, look, this is quite the season. Again, we're in the midst of a pandemic. We've had shelter at home. Some places are going through different phases of, coming back out, so to speak. Some are not, right? Now we have, again, protests and different things happening. How do you counsel people if asked about what should I be learning during this time? Or what should I be doing with, quote unquote, the extra time that I have, if they even ask, right? Or if you observe people who are, have tons of extra time, what's some of the counsel that you're giving?
Yeah. That was an actual interesting assumption that we had coming into COVID, is that now people have extra time. But what we found is that's probably not the case in all instances.
Right.
People have families, they have loved ones that are sick. There's new stresses of just being at home and managing different aspects of life, along with, working from home, and the work doesn't really stop. And we had to really pivot as organizations and as, people to say, are we going to be empathetic and understand boundaries and self-regulate and all those things in this time? But what I tell people is we went from, in a matter of, months or weeks, going from a pandemic where now we shifted from virtual to virtual work in a matter of moments, to now facilitating and leading teams virtually in a matter of moments, to having to create new policies and procedures in a matter of moments. And you could continue down that train of thought. And we've radically had to shift how we work because many companies weren't in that type of environment or in that type of mode of operation, prior to COVID. So that alone created a learning opportunity where we saw the proliferation of LinkedIn posts of, this is how you operate in the virtual environment, how to lead your team virtually, how to be mindful during these times, how to manage stress in these times. What people were picking up was, in the now, there were learning moments that people didn't have to deal with as intensely as before. And so now you're in this moment where all these things, dealing with stress, dealing with virtual teams, managing your work. Now, when you have kids to homeschool and all these things, all of these became heightened priorities in people's minds. And not that the knowledge or the content wasn't out there. It now just had to get repackaged, brushed off, and just said, hey, let's put this out there because people need it right now. So those are some moments that are relevant.
Yeah.
You fast forward a little bit, and now you've hit a whole new challenge of the social unrest and the sad and unfortunate deaths of all the people that we've seen and heard in the news. I mean, these are sad things that we had to deal with as a society. And you think about these things, and we shifted from dealing with the challenge of virtual work to dealing with the challenge of social conflict. And internal conflict with our views on race and prejudice and discrimination. And that I mean, is unprecedented times to shift this quickly,
Right.
In terms of what people are having to learn. And in these moments now, in the past couple of weeks, people are asking, how do I deal with these topics with my team? How do I have these conversations? Do I know enough about race relations in the United States and what has occurred over generations? And how do I talk about this intelligently? All of these things are now becoming heightened, acumen points or things that we have to learn. And it's just amazing to watch as we all have been, seeing these events unfold, and you're having to switch your mind to different topics over a course of months.
Yeah. And to that point, in terms of that threshold question, then how do you think about setting up the learning cycle, if you will, in that moment, right? So let's call this a season, right? In this season where first of all, there's so much to digest, right? That the media offers up, right? On top of that, now pick any outlet, if you will, right? Netflix, PBS, so on and so forth. A cadre of films and specials and documentaries, right? So on and so forth. So you're overloaded with information on social channels and everything else, right? I'm sure people are coming to you inside the organization going, well, for sure, you're going to give us the right buffet of learning, right? During this season, right? Surely you're going to tell us the right things to learn. To your point, everything from EQ, emotional intelligence, through very specific things along this topic, so on and so forth. But again, going back to the point of self-management, right? Just to push back on that a little bit, what's your response? If they don't have a Bejoy who's going to set up the buffet, how should a person begin to think about consuming things, right? And what are the right things to consume?
Yeah, I empathize with my learning and development colleagues and people who are dealing with this.
Right.
I was in the learning and development, field for a long time, and in HR strategy, you kind of see a lot of other aspects of HR. And I look over to my learning and development colleagues, and they're getting peppered with so many different requests, around learning. And quite honestly, whether it's we have the buffet or not, the real question is, are those modes of learning fast enough to deal with the pace of change? Like, unless you have someone curating very quickly and have scalable learning solutions and the digital capabilities and the content ready to go, you're taking time to actually create these things, curate these things, and push them out there. So what I would ask somebody is, well, things are changing. Who have you tapped into in your network who are already learning at the speed of change? And are you using the wisdom of the crowd, so to speak? And what we've seen is some great cross-learning just from the network of the organization, where people are sharing what they read, what they learned, what they saw on LinkedIn, and the trading of information and insight is so prolific and just really impactful, because people are getting things quickly.
Yeah.
Or quite honestly, again, like LinkedIn, you just go on LinkedIn, scroll your feed for 30 seconds, and you'll have all the curated content you want in terms of the topics that might be relevant to a broader audience. But I do think, it could get a little frenetic. It could get a little like, hey, ask yourself, do you actually need to learn it? Or some of these things common sense? Because I do feel that as a person in HR and learning professional, I ask myself, Bejoy, are you asking for content or things that really is common sense? And I always get told, well, Bejoy, not all things are common sense, but I think that's the age that we're in, is that learning to learn means not only to be able to seek the right content, information, and insight, but also to process for yourself and problem solve for yourself and say, how would I like to address such and such, challenge that I'm facing? Not everything requires, the certification or the learning nugget or the vignette. And it really sometimes just comes down to a basic question of like, how would I solve this? Yeah.
I love that answer. Tap into the wisdom of the crowd. I love that. So let me ask you this. So kind of switching topics a little bit. When you think about the unemployment numbers, right, and the spike that we saw, and to me, as I was processing it, I was thinking about it from the frame of, wow, we had just exploded into a gig economy, right? Where people were finding so many different ways to earn income, right? Whether you were Uber driver, Airbnb, the Amazon distributors, which I think they're still doing pretty decent. But nevertheless, you saw just a gross amount of people have to file unemployment and go into unemployment, so on and so forth. And now not all of them are making their way back because a lot of those jobs are not the type of jobs that are companies that are reopening. Right. As people like that think about, again, what new skills should I be obtaining? And I know this is a very difficult question, right? Because I mean, you're not the sorcerer of all
of all skills,
of all industry and all skills, right? But again, I'm just gonna put you in the hot seat because you're here, right? You've done in a couple different industries. How do you think about advice that you would lend in that space?
That's a great one. I think you have to steer the answer towards, well, what kind of a job role are you trying to take? And how quickly do you think you could take on the skill development to get there? So there are base things that I think everybody should be honing in the new world of work, whether that be corporate America or other. Complex problem solving, the ability to think strategically. There's this idea of design thinking or human-centered design, just basically how do you develop solutions that are meant for humans,
right?
And really meet the mark of what people are looking for. Those are just like some modern skills that I think we went from like project management and process and things like that to human-centered design, complexity and strategy and these things. These are modern skills now that you actually have to have, not just at the top of the house, but you actually have to have them in various levels of the organization. In terms of like technical functional stuff, I would say, analytical thinking. I mean, the world is data driven. You probably have heard that ad nauseum, but it's you can't avoid it. Everything is coming with data now, and not that you have to be the coder, which some people might choose that path and say, hey, I'm going to do a pivot and get my certification or get some more rigor and academic training in data and analytics and things like that. But others might say, I just need to really brush up on analytic questioning, how to read data and interpret data. Do I have some base knowledge of what's out there in terms of how I can leverage data to make meaningful decisions and do my work? Those are things that I could say anybody could dive into and it'd still be relevant. And then technology savvy. Are you up with the times in terms of working with modern tools? Right now, we're using Livestream. Who would have thought some years ago that this would be such a common platform for communicating, for learning, for discussion, for interacting with customers, people, and all those things? So getting savvy with, I think, social media and digital tech work tools are so important. We see Microsoft Teams and other platforms like Mural and people doing brainstorming sessions virtually. COVID has been the priming session for us to get comfortable with digital work tools. And I think that's going to stick with us in the future.
Yeah. And what's interesting about what you said is you started with what I think are skills that fit in what we used to call, soft skills, right? Complex problem solving, design thing. Are they considered soft skills or not really?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting. I think they're becoming the harder skills to find and develop. Yeah.
Okay.
They are. It's interesting because people think it's like just somewhere inside somebody, but there's process to these things. There's actually technique and some people have either intuitively or trained have gotten the process down so ingrained that it looks like they're just coming up with it, or it looks like they're just thinking. It's like watching the artist who, plays this great piece and you're like, it's just brilliance inside of them. But the fact of the matter is there was years and years of perfecting a process to get to that outcome. So I would associate those things. I think that soft skills word needs to die. It needs to go away. It needs to get brushed under the rug. It needs to get thrown out, because the things that are actually going to differentiate people in the new context of work are things like social and emotional intelligence, are things like problem solving skills, thinking skills, actual thinking skills, and how do you connect dots between things in your organization. And I'll give you a practical example. I'm sure anybody who might be listening to this, you work in an organization where there's like 50 things going on. And someone says, well, what's the priority? They're all the priority, right? How do you get all these initiatives to work together? These are complex problem solving skills to get things to connect.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's good. That's good. I like that. Yeah. So one distinction I'd make then, so let's not call them soft skills, but let's call them transferable skills across the board, right? Because those skills, design thinking, complex problem solving, let's add to that things like resilience, things like we started with, self-management, things like persistence, and all those things that look like character traits, but are tested over time to help you make them habitual and whatnot, and build up your ability to do them well, are things you can cross industries with, cross functions inside of industries with, and actually help differentiate you from the rest of the pack over time. To your point, things like, because a lot of times we have these trends, right, where people focus on, to your point, Python programming, like that's the thing for a second. Like, oh my God, I got to be a Python programmer, right? Or I've got to learn how to do AI, right, and machine learning, and I've got to learn how to do, right? And then if that leaves and you did not pick up those other transferable skills, you may struggle with that, right? And I think the other critical component, again, around the self-management piece is that it raises your antenna and ability to start sensing and thinking differently, to understand what's happening in front of you, right? Maybe before other people do, right? So you can understand, it's like the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Well, it's one thing when your cheese is already moved. It's another thing to have an inkling that someone's going to move the cheese, right? And you know the cheese is going to move. So how do you position yourself before the cheese is moved?
Totally. And you kind of get into the idea of like dealing with change and things like that. That itself is a skill. It's funny. We spent a lot of time on training people on change management skills. Like, how do you facilitate change management so people can just get it and be aware and be knowledgeable and execute on what you want them to do? I would propose that we should also have change, like acceptance skills in the workplace. Yeah. We spend so much time deliberating on how we can convince people to get to a new place, where I think we should actually start developing the core skill of people responding and being accepting of the world that's happening around them. And how do you take the things that are coming to you, process that quickly, and say, hey, how do I become an agent of positive change within my organization and move things forward? Because so many good ideas and so many progressive things that will actually create really good outcomes from an organization die on the vine because it gets through the masses, and it just dies because we're just not ready to do it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, adaptability, fungibility. I mean, when you're in a leadership role, for folks who aren't in leadership roles yet, one of the critical questions when we're struggling with leading teams and we have to go through a major transition and we're struggling, one of the questions we'll ask each other to help each other out, and we'll ask them if you could, the boat question we ask each other, if you only could take 4 or 5 people in the boat with you, right? So you got a team of 20 now, and you only can take 4 or 5 people in the boat with you. Who are you going to take? Yeah. And it's a great question, because it makes you start to think and go, oh man, if I can only take 4 or 5 people in the boat, who am I going to take? And a lot of times, again, it's not always the technical skills. You're thinking about who's most fungible. Yes. And fungible a lot of times comes down to those coping skills. They're adaptable. They can come off the ropes. Like, no matter how many times they get hit, they come, like Mike Tyson said, everybody got a plan that they get hit in the mouth. When they get hit in the mouth, they come back off the ropes though, right? You can count on them to shape shift, right? And so on and so forth. So everything you just said, man, spot on. So spot on. It's
so good. I love that question. And you just had me thinking in my own mind about people that I've worked with. And yeah, it really comes down to, yes, there's some technical skills I'd love to take on a team, but it's really how people work with each other. It's like all the fundamentals that we've always known about, how they think, how they problem solve. And one thing you mentioned earlier, resiliency, and use that term grit, the ability to bounce back and persist through challenges and, get through those to accomplish things. Some of the best people to work with are the ones that they just get it done.
Right.
They just get it done. And
Right.
it's not a lot of complaining and whining. They're inspired by doing good work and just moving things forward. And when they hit opposition, they're able to be resilient in the moment and continue to press. So those are things that, I would place my money on those things.
Those are good.
Yeah.
If people come to you, and again, tough question, folks come to you and say, hey, look, I'm game. You guys convince me. What are some great resources if I'm going to go down this road to try to build up these transferable skills? Are there any things you've seen that you've really gravitated towards in terms of good resources or tools?
It's interesting. You would think that I have some like rocket science answer to the great tools and resources, but it's really becoming real simple nowadays. You could go to most academic institutions now, some of the Ivy Leagues, and find massive open online courses to learn pretty much anything. And it's accessible, if not free, very low cost, and self-paced, or maybe there's time, but there is you're almost getting a Ivy League education from a good school, or maybe your local college program, but you're getting things and information and insight that we couldn't get some years ago.
Right.
And it's accessible. I mentioned LinkedIn today. LinkedIn is constantly putting out curriculum, learning pads, new content, social content that's out there that you can learn from. If you're on the how-to market, if you're just looking for a quick how-to, everyone says it. Why is it that people go to YouTube and Google before they'll go to their internal company's content?
Right.
Because it's all there. It's just the quick how-to is already all there.
Right.
And it's accessible. But for deeper knowledge and deeper, if you're looking for some deeper skill development over time, I'm still a classic person that I go back to which programs and which institutions out there are providing either certifications in the moment, conferences or things that are relevant, timely, and I can apply them,
that's
right
good.
now. And that's kind of how I make my choices. I do want to make one point. I think we talked about the speed of change. And a lot of people think that learning at the speed of change means consuming more information.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the truth. In fact, consuming more information, you get into decision confusion. You don't know what to do with it. I would actually say we got to move from consuming more information to just purely making it happen and having a mindset of application. So when you start filtering through that and you say, what am I actually going to apply? Do I even have the opportunity to apply it? And what is happening around me that is taking precedence that I need to learn? When you start asking those questions, you start getting to filtering and focus of what you should learn, and then really focus on application, not consumption.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you hit the nail on the head. That for me is almost like the when I say get out of the laboratory, right? Like stop conducting experiments. You need to go out and actually do the work.
Right.
Feel some of the pain of it, right? And then go back and learn some more, right? So you have to go learn and do.
You got to learn and do. And it's a classic model. It's like nothing has changed about human behavior when it comes to learning. How we learn or how we consume information has changed. The process that we go through mentally and behaviorally, a lot of that is still the fundamentals that we know of, that it takes time, experience, and application to take what was a piece of content of learning, process it, to gain insight from it, and then to move it to actual behavioral change or to an applied thing. And quite honestly, you read something, you learn something, you watch something, go out there and start testing with it, experiment with it, start applying with it. But reading the article doesn't necessarily mean you have learned.
Exactly.
And that's a key premise that we have to understand.
Exactly. You see Laura's question. What are our thoughts about the Prusky or an ADKAR model?
ADKAR. Yeah, ADKARs are great. ProSci folks created change management tools for ADKAR and things like that. I think even they are looking at how do I adapt ADKAR to be more iterative? In the world of change management, there's a lot of it used to be like project management kind of waterfall methodology. You start with awareness building, then you're trying to get to identify needs, and you're developing people, you're trying to create awareness, all these things, and then you move it through the process. Nowadays things are so iterative, and some people might be in a new way of working where they're using agile methods, they're using other things in the workplace. So change management now has to change. And you have to say, how do I trickle in information to people in bits?
Right.
How do I, when we're experimenting on something, we're keeping people informed and we're getting them bought in through the actual experimentation, not through some like robust business case. So I love these models, but I would say anything is up for game in terms of adapting them to the real environment of work.
Yeah.
And when you really dissect it, work is a bouncy thing that goes around, and it's iterative and it's messy at times, and we have to be okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, best learning experience for me in terms of ramping up two learning experiences I can think about. When I was about 6 years ago, we went from, these product cycles of, doing all this consumer test group stuff, right, and developing the product, to how do you do it really quick, really small cycles and real small iterations of a concept product that the customer would buy, right? And how do you go from what would be like 90 days to like 4 or 5 days, right?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Right. So that was the one. And then the second one was moving from agile being just a technology team thing to a full company thing, that everything is done agile, meaning that every 3, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, you're having report out on points of these different things around the project. You're having regular stand-ups that are happening. And you have, to your point, even though the overall project is this long, you're willing to bite off these small pieces and adapt and change based on the progress and what you learn as you're going down that pipe, right?
Yep.
That for me was tremendously eye-opening in terms of, again, flexibility and adaptation and learning where different people were along that spectrum. Yeah, some people that go, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I cannot live with this. Like, we just need to say we're going to do this and just stick with it. And we go, wait a minute, what if it's not working? Well, we said we should just, what we said we're going to do is like, well, wait a minute, but that it's not working. Like, so just reaching into to help folks come out of that, right? And figure out how they're going to go forward. And I think that speaks to one of the biggest things in all of this is how you unlearn.
Powerful.
Right. Yeah. And the awareness to need to unlearn a lot of different things to be able to fully step back and embrace a new thing.
You should just drop the mic right now. That's the word of the day. And unlearn, such a powerful concept, because when you think about, learning at the speed of change, this whole topic of skill development and how do we just keep ourselves improving and modernizing, a lot of it's not about adding new knowledge. It's undoing things inside your current knowledge base, and then saying, am I open to the possibility that there's other ways to do this?
Right.
If you can't get to the undoing piece, it's very hard. And that's where we get change resistance, because we're so entrenched in a way that we can't even see the possibilities of creative things ahead of us, because it's uncertain, it's unknown.
Yep.
I was having a conversation with somebody else that, like, the term business case actually like annoys me sometimes, because the classic idea of the business case is about defining your problem, saying here's the solution and here's what we're going to get out of it, and therefore I need investment dollars to go do it.
Yep.
It doesn't work today in the world of innovation, where you're solving problems. We have to come up with things that doesn't have a precedence yet, and doesn't have a tried and true numbers and numerics to it just yet. What you should do is define the problem, say here are the outcomes we want to measure of what good would look like. However, the solutions to get there, let's experiment, to your point. Let's iterate. Let's figure out what we should do. And in that process, we will create measurements to tell us if we're on the right track or not.
Yeah.
And then you could say, cut bait, not worth it.
Right.
Or you could say, ooh, I think we found something here. Or I thought we were going down in one direction of value, and now we're finding there's some really cool stuff that we're finding through this experiment and this process. We should actually tap into this opportunity.
Exactly.
So it's unlearning is so important.
So good. So good. And the last thing I want to touch on as we begin to wrap up is something you said, and I just want to highlight it because you said it and it's so good, which is learning at the speed of change is not about consuming a lot. It's about what did you say after that?
It was
choice
actually,
consumer. How'd you say it?
Yeah, it was really around not more consumption of knowledge, but it's
Right.
the application of knowledge and
The application.
You know, the idea of the mindset. I know we talk about growth mindset. That's more about, are we willing and have the mind to just go through failure and learn, take on new challenges, things like that. But there is a mindset of get it done, make it happen. Like learn something, apply something.
Right.
Don't just quote unquote learn something and forward it along to everybody and say, I've learned something. Great article, great this, great that. Those are all great for social kind of cultural information and insight. But insight without action, it truly is like the tree that fell in the woods that nobody knew about.
Right.
Like that old saying. It's like, okay, tell me that you said you were a black belt. Show me that you're a black belt.
Right.
In karate.
Right. Exactly.
So if you know you've gotten an insight, you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your organization, you owe it to your teams to start experimenting and applying those things and learning from that process. And then your learning deepens and then it goes from there to create outcomes. Learning without outcomes, it's almost like, well, what are we doing it for? So I tell people, I don't need to be the expert in everything. I need to be the expert in the things that I'm trying to drive a needle towards, right? Drive the needle or create measurements or outcomes for.
Exactly.
I don't need to know everything. And that's where great effective leaders come from because they understand that. And they're like, I want my team to learn. I want my people to learn. I want them to solve problems that I don't have the mind capacity, the time capacity, or other things to focus on.
Excellent. Excellent. And the only thing I would add to that is to the point of doing, as well as it's not about more consumption. That also means inherent in what you said is you have to filter up top too. You've got to be filtered. So, all right. So as we begin to wrap up, any other points we didn't miss? Because I'm going to try to recap. And if I miss anything in the recap, man, please jump in.
Yeah. You know what? I just a couple questions I actually jotted down as we were thinking about this topic of the filtering piece. I just touch upon that. What is changing around you that takes precedence? So think about what we just went through over the past couple months. Those are a great example of things changing. It's taking precedence and now it's creating an urge for learning. Focusing your attention and energy towards things that matter, will always be, be faster and better retention for you. Don't ask yourself, does this matter to me? That's a very personal question, but does it matter to you?
Right.
And it's complex but simple at the same time. It's like asking yourself, if I engage in my next 30 minutes here to do X, Y, and Z learning activity, does it matter to me? And that matter might be because it's meaningful for you personally. It could be applicable to your job. It could be, trainable, transferable, all of those things that we talked about. So ask those questions, and I think that'll help you filter your process.
That's good. That's good. All right. So I'm going to try to recap, and Bejoy, keep me honest, man. Jump in. So one, we talked about learning. One is important. And I asked Bejoy the question early on. People come to him and say, man, how do I make up the ladder? And we both kind of talked about this. One is set your GPS. What are you focused on? Right. So whether you're working with a manager or going to the HR strategy person or you're self-managing, you've got to set a destination because that's going to guide your learning journey. Right. Yeah. Two, tap into the wisdom of the crowd. Right. Grab things that have already been curated. Right. Why go out and just, grab
waiting for someone to do it for you.
Yeah. That's such good advice, Bejoy. Right. Tap into the wisdom of the crowd. And again, the magical 4-letter word free is good. Right. So all those schools you mentioned, there's so many schools offering things. There's so many YouTube videos. So once you know what you want, that's the other powerful thing. Once you've decided what you want and you Google on it. So whether it's from Udemy on YouTube, bunch of different platforms, the price can be from free up to 99 cents to $4.99, whatever the case is. And you can start the learning journey. 3, think about those transferable skills that are going to apply across the board. So functions inside a company you may be in, different industries, different cities, different towns, different countries. such as Bejoy mentioned, design thinking, human-centered design, complex problem solving, analytical skills, etc. And then on the more technical skill sides, right, it's hard to get away from technology. So technology is just continuing to evolve. And so you can always, I could state what technology, what technical thing it is right now. By the time you listen to this podcast, it will have changed probably, right? So it's always evolving, right? And then the next thing that Bejoy mentioned I thought was really good is also being able to use modern tools. And we've learned a lot about that just going through the pandemic, the shift to working from home. And then the thing we talked about too, the willingness to unlearn, right? Being willing to take a step back. And then last but not least, again, don't equate learning at the speed of change to consumption and wider consumption versus filtering what you want to learn and then having a learn do cycle, right? Learn and get it done, learn and get it done, and be adaptable, learning, picking up your pace and adjusting as you learn. Yeah. Love good, it. Man. Love good, it. Good, brother. Good to have you, man.
I'm so appreciative to be here and appreciate everybody who's listening right now. And no, we have more to do, more to learn, more to apply. And so I'm excited for all of that.
Yeah. Hey, man. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, brother.
You too.
Good night, audience. See you guys on the next episode.
See ya.